much of the school of, occasionally I'll do a cover with action or a moment from the story or whatever, but I'm very much a fan of doing a montage, sort of like movie posters. I think that to me you can tell a pretty decent story with that single image, comprised of different images, very, very well. And I'm very much into the design of covers, as far as like how I move your eye around and what balance is right. And to me, the aesthetic, as far as design goes, is far more important than doing action or having walls exploding or anything like that. So that's how I approach it. And I start by I just take a book that I've got at the house and I just sit and literally. I have little covers mocked up about maybe 3 inches high, and I just go through and I'm not even drawing the characters initially. What I'm doing is I'm putting down shapes and working with different shapes and how they flow and move into each other and where the logo is going to be. And as a cover artist in America, you always have to worry about that stupid UPC box, and we've begged them for years to put it on the back, and they won't do it. But that, to me, just ruins everything. I mean, it's very difficult especially if you're doing a very balanced, symmetrical design where everything on this side, it sort of mirrors everything on the other side. And I do a lot of that on my cover work. And if you're doing a very symmetrical cover like that in your design, it's very frustrating to have that damn little UPC box go boing on the bottom and just like throw the balance completely off. So I just start with shapes, and anything from circles to like swirling motions to waves of different other types of shapes, and I sort of work with that, and then I take the shape phase and I continue with that, and I go into contrast in my thumbnails, and I start taking the different shapes and contrasting them in darks and lights against each other to see how I can control your focus on the image. And then once I get, it almost looks like I'm doing Picasso cubism stuff when I'm doing this. When you look at all the little thumbnails, and sometimes I'll do as many as 20 or 30 of them before I ever even begin to draw a face or anything. So I'll get to that point, and then once I have something I'm happy with, then I move to the thumbnail stage on actually roughing in some characters, and then I'll actually go and get my models together and shoot photo reference for everything, and then do the finished illustration based on that. I prefer to work with a full script because that way it gives me the dialogue. I know what the characters are saying, I know what they're emoting, and in my work, the acting part of the interaction between the characters is absolutely paramount to me. That's the most important thing, is the human interaction and the emotion. And if I have all that dialogue in the script, it makes that part of my job extremely easy. And as far as the writers go, they're different. James wrote a full script, but James was very much about, I need for you to, if I wrote, a 7-panel page, I'd like to see a 7-panel page. If I have the pacing this way, I've thought it through. I really would like it to be that way. And not to say he never wanted any input from me, because then I would just be an art monkey, and that's not what I'm interested in doing. But he was, for lack of a better description, less, and this is not a negative thing, he was less interested in true 50%, 50% on each side collaboration than some other writers I've worked with. Warren Ellis, I got absolutely 100% zero input from him at all. He doesn't talk to people on the telephone for some reason. May just be the time difference thing, because I'm in America and he's in Britain. So all my communication with him was via email. And it's very difficult to really communicate with someone if all you're doing is email. But he would say in the script, if you got a different way of doing it than the way I wrote it, I'm certainly open to taking a look at that. Brian Vaughn is probably, in my 20-year career, he is, our working relationship is the closest thing to 100% collaboration that I have ever had. He writes a full script, but Brian always writes in every single script. If you can think of a better way to do this than I did, you go ahead and run with it. And during the first 15 years or so, I sort of whittled down the way that I like to work and developed my idea for what I thought a perfect comic book page should be as far as panel count. And to me, and I wouldn't necessarily call it decompressed storytelling, but it's a lot less compressed than, you know, having a 9-panel page. But my idea of a perfect comic book page is about 4 panels, no more, no less. And I think the pacing is really great that way. And a lot of the stuff I do is widescreen shots, like in a movie. And I tell my stories very cinematically in that respect. But in that way, it gives me the opportunity to add another beat or two if I feel like I need it. You know, and normally there'll be small beats, like I'll do, you know, like I said, I do a lot of wide, you know, all the way across the page shots. But sometimes it's nice to throw in a couple of small insets here and there just as an extra beat or two of images. And what I ask of any writer I work with now, I have very simple requests, and the only thing I don't insist on, but I ask if they'll do it, is can you please keep the scripts to 4-panel pages, because you're going to get better work out of me that way. And then some projects I'll use very, very heavy blacks, and it has a very noir look to things. Some projects I use more photo reference, and then other projects I use less. I just sort of let the individual book or project that I'm working on, or even covers too, I let it sort of tell me what it needs to look like. And I'm lucky enough that I have a fairly broad repertoire as far as like looks and techniques and styles that I use in my art. And as I start a new project, it will ultimately tell me exactly what it needs to look like. But with Starman, that was a big learning curve for me, because I hadn't quite figured out a lot of things yet. I still don't have it all figured out, but I had very little figured out when I started Starman. So I had just started using photo reference, like I think right after issue 0 or issue 1 of that book. And so that was a big learning, you know, experience for me. And also being on a monthly comic is a breeding ground for creativity, because you have to work so much in such a little amount of time that you can't help but get better if you're a good artist. I mean, you're just going to grow and learn. And then I went on to other projects like the Liberty File, which all took place in the 1940s, and it was wartime Europe. And so that, to me, dictated that it needed to be very, very dark and a lot of heavy blacks and make it look almost like film noir. And then when I came to Ex Machina, it was very clear to me that this book was about politics, and it was very sort of akin visually in my mind to a television series called West Wing. And on that show, and in Ex Machina, the drama and the entertaining part of that comic is the interaction that I spoke of earlier between the characters and the conversations that they're having and how they're emoting and moving around and stuff. That's where all the tension and the drama and everything is. So it was clear to me that I needed to drop all the very heavy blacks and dense shadow work that I did on previous projects and go for a more open look, and trust my colorist to come in and you know, carry a lot of the weight for me and let him tackle all the areas that would have been normally drenched in black. So it actually makes for a more colorful, vivid project than it would have been if it was a lot of heavy black. And that way, when we do a story or a scene that is very dark and requires that mood, when I go and add the blacks back into the art, like I have done a few times in Ex Machina, it has impact because you don't see it all the time in every issue. So.